So, welcome to CEO Zone's Meet the Speaker series. We're honored today to have Mark Matteson, the author of 9 books. And I got to say that he's an international speaker. He has clients like Microsoft, John Deere, Aflac, many of the big companies that are in your backyard. And it's just a pleasure to have him. As I think about it, and I know that he's been married to his wife, Debbie, over 40 years. He has 3 sons and grandsons, granddaughters. I heard on an Audible yesterday when I was driving that your granddaughter Lydia was 12 at the time, so I'm not sure how old the Audible was, but that was interesting to me because I have a granddaughter named Lydia. And in your bio, it says you're an edu-trainer or an edutainer, I guess I should say, because you are a trainer, an educator, and you are certainly an entertaining young man. It's really great to meet you again, to see you again. I thought about this morning. 25 years ago, we were at Executive Books with Charles Tremendous Jones, the CEO of Executive Books. He introduced us from my memory, and I could be wrong. Here's where you can take over. Could be wrong, but I believe your first book, Freedom from Fear, was not quite published. It was around 1999. I think Freedom from Fear came out in 2000. I do remember vividly whenever it came out, I got a phone call on my second or third cell phone ever in my life. It might have been a bag phone. I don't remember, but it was a long time ago, sometime in 2000. Tremendous Bill, it's Charlie. I just shipped you a pallet of Freedom from Fear by Mark Matteson. You're going to love it. Thank you for your business. Click. That was the end of the discussion. Several days later, a pallet of Freedom from Fear showed up. I was honored to be able to read it early on, and it was just a pleasure. And I'm wondering, are you going to have a 25th anniversary edition of
That's a
Freedom?
great question. In preparation for this meeting, I reread it in one sitting, which is one of the reasons it's so popular. It's a bathroom book. You can read it in 4 sittings. You don't mind your legs going numb. But it's that's a great idea, actually, because the edition I have now, the 3rd edition, I added a chapter and some page notes, but it's such a quick read, but it's a little bit like cheesecake. You know, you can eat the whole thing in one sitting if you want, and it's delicious. But I found myself, I literally cried 2 times reading it, knowing what was coming. I still made me cry, right? So it touches a heartstring. There was a wonderful quote from John Legend, the singer-songwriter. He said, Spike Lee asked him, he said, what makes a hit song? He said, it's universal and it's personal. And I think Freedom from Fear is that. It's universal and it's personal, and it touches people's hearts and minds. So the 25th anniversary would be really good. I could probably add another chapter and redo the cover and, all of that. But I have to tell you, I think it's important, the backstory, the origin story of Charlie and I. Is that okay if I go there?
Please do.
Okay, so 1993, 94, right in there, I was working for a company called Edge Learning Institute, and I was driving 55 miles one way to work every day through horrible traffic in Seattle. But fortunately, the owner of the company, a mentor of mine, Bob Moad, had hundreds of audio programs. So I was literally listening to Charlie Tremendous Jones on cassette on a Thursday night at 6:30 in rush hour traffic. I'm literally stopped. And I was laughing so hard I had to pull off the road to catch my breath. Now, there's only been a couple of men that have done that, George Carlin being one of them. Laughing so hard, I literally had to leave. Okay. So I pulled over, caught my breath. I turned the cassette box over, and it was a 717 number, not knowing that was Pennsylvania. I called it on my cell phone. Executive Books. Now it's 9:30 at night, and Charlie answers the phone. Executive Books. And I said, hey, look, I'm looking for a guy named Charlie Jones, and I don't even know if he's alive anymore. There's this long pause, Bill, and he says, no, he's still around. I said, really? I said, well, how do I get a hold of this guy? The will o' the wisp or what? He goes, well, you're talking to him. I said, oh my gosh. I go, let me take my foot out of my mouth now that I have athlete's tongue. And he laughed uproariously, that belly laugh he had. He goes, who am I speaking to? I said, Mark Matteson. He, tremendous Mark. How can I help? How can I serve? I said, well, Charlie, I just had to call you. I said, because you touched my heart with this, with your audio program. Do you ever come to Seattle? Can I pick you up at the airport or drive you to your gig? And he literally said, oh, you've got a servant's heart. We'll figure it out. So that was it. That was the beginning. That's literally how we met. And true to my word, he came to Seattle a couple of months later, and I picked him up at his hotel and I drove him to Gig Harbor, and he did a presentation, and I sat there enthralled. You know, he could command a room, Bill. And there wasn't a dry eye in the house, and there wasn't anybody that wasn't laughing so hard they were falling over. And on the way back, I said, I just experienced something unique. I don't know that I've ever seen somebody do what you do and have the audience in the palm of their hand. I said, you have a real gift. He goes, I'll give you 10 years to stop saying that. So, I mean, so then from there, he would send me books. He would mail me books. So I started reading all these books he was sending me. And then one day, oh gosh, like probably 2 years later, so this would have been 98, right in there, I had written a series of essays. And I was kind of like a chicken soup kind of thing, right? So I cobbled together all these different things and I put them in a binder. And so that was one file. And the other was Freedom from Fear, not thinking that he would be interested in this little story that I wrote and this little fable, really. And I thought he would say, oh, these essays are terrific. But I just wanted his opinion. I said, what do you think of them? Are they publishable? And he said, well, he said, I don't know about those essays. You can probably do that on your own. But that little story, he said, I'd like to publish it. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. You're a publisher? He says, what do you think Executive Books is? An underwear store? I don't know. What is Executive Books? So he said, I'd like to print 10,000 copies. And I said, good golly, oh Molly, what? I said, what does that mean? He said, well, I'm going to give you 1,000 copies to sell in the back of the room. And I said, the back of what room? He said, where you speak. And I went, oh, like I knew. It's like, okay. I said, well, how much do I charge? He goes, whatever you want. 20 is not too much. And that was it. That's how we met. And the book took off, obviously, and changed my life, literally. And when people started saying, calling me or sending me a letter or fax, back then it was faxes, saying the book changed their life, I just went, wow. And then about, I want to say two or 3 years later, he said, you have any other ideas about the next book? And I said, well, Charlie, let me tell you, I said, I've gotten so much correspondence, letters and people writing handwritten notes, wanting to know more. Well, they wanted to know two things. Was it a true story? Is Len a real guy? And is there more? Tell us more about Len. So I wrote Freedom from Fear Forever, which is that one. And that one took off. And then it was like, wow, this is really something. And Charlie was just so generous with his time and the marketing of it. And then, and this is the bittersweet part of this, of the tale. When he got sick and the cancer started to affect him and he had the eye patch and that phase of his life, he called me one day and he said, so you got anything else in the vault? And I said, what vault? He said, I know you're still writing. You're not kidding me. You can't stop. And I said, yeah, you're right. I said, I got this other little story, but I'm not sure if it's, publishable. He goes, well, send it to me. And so I did. And then he called me about a week later. He goes, well, eliminate a third of the book and I'll publish it. Now, Bill, that's like saying, of your 3 children, which one of the 3 would you like to get rid of for adoption? Put in a foster home, right? And I'm like, what? So I called a friend of mine. I said, I've got to edit this thing down. Can you help me? And he said, yeah, he's a speaker and a brilliant writer. And so he helped me edit it. And I got rid of a third and I sent Charlie it. Because here's what he said, Bill. He said, well, Og Mandino taught the world men don't read books over 100 pages. So I came in at about 105, 110 pages right in there. He says, okay, I'll publish it. And that was the last project he and I did together before he passed.
Hmm. Thank you for that story. I sincerely miss him once a week. I have to stop and think about how important he was in my life. So thank you for sharing
I have a picture in my other office of him
that.
and four of his books stacked up. I see it every day.
Yeah,
You know, yeah, he
he
changed.
was a great
He
man.
changed my life, and quite frankly, he changed lots of people's lives.
Yep,
What I didn't understand was, I think, and this was one of those prescient things that happens where you just go, "Wow," because the book starts at a funeral with 2,000 people, and everybody's wondering, nobody knows anybody else in the funeral. When I was at Charlie's funeral, there were 1,500 people and a bunch of folks on television screens as well.
Mhm.
And I barely made it there. I drove from Detroit like a bat out of hell.
Yep,
I got there like a half an hour before the funeral started,
yep,
and so in a way, it was kind of like an homage to Charlie.
absolutely. That was a who's who evening. I remember Ken Blanchard on the telecast, and Mark
Yes,
Sanborn, and some of the best authors in the world of our time, anyway, were right there celebrating Charlie's life.
you know what Mark Sanborn said to me? He goes, "Wow,
No.
you're a lot shorter on the phone. I'm
Yeah,
6'7", right? And he's like 5'9".
you're a lot shorter on the phone.
That was a great line.
Uh, since we kind of got stuck in freedom for fear, one of the things I wanted to share with the audience was that was probably in 2000 was the first time I ever thought about, and your book spawned the dream list, not just goals for 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, 1 month, this week, today, but literally, what are your lifetime goals? Where did you find that golden nugget, and how did it come about in the book? Was that?
There was a Life magazine, and now I'm really showing my age. There was a Life magazine article about John Goddard.
Oh, yeah.
He'd written 110 lifetime goals.
Okay.
Paddle down the Nile at sunset, you know, climb Machu Picchu. I mean, it was this extraordinary list and he did it when he was like 25 years old.
Okay.
And by the time he was, I think, 60, he'd accomplished like 79 of them. And I thought, wow, what a great idea. So I did that. And honestly, at the time, I was a pretty successful salesperson for a contracting company, but I wrote some pretty challenging goals. And one of them was to become a best-selling author and an international speaker, which quite frankly, at the time when I wrote it, I thought, who do I think I am? This is crazy. It was so far out of my comfort zone. I literally couldn't handle my own dream, if you will. And so I wrote out a description, my life in 5 years, right? And I typed it up, and it said things like, I'm friends with Ken Blanchard and Charlie Jones, and and I put a financial amount to it, and I typed it up, and I read it every day. I laminated it. I put it in the shower. So
Yeah.
every time I took a shower, I would read this description of my life in 5 years. And then 5 years came and went, and we moved. We bought a bigger house, and that document was gone. It was gone for
Mm.
probably a year. I mean, it was in a box somewhere. My
Right.
wife finally said, "Honey, the garage needs to be purged. You need to clean all that stuff up." So I went out there and I found it. And literally, Bill, everything I wrote had come true. I was living the life I wrote down that I couldn't really have imagined when I wrote it. It was so far out of my comfort zone. I literally said, if I showed this to somebody, they would laugh. Because I was a technician. I started out fixing air conditioning units when I was 18 years old in the Air Force. So to to go that far, to change that much was extraordinary. But it all started with the whole idea of the lifetime goal list.
Right. And the other thing I remembered listening to it on Sunday was that when you reach a goal, set a new one, which I know that had to be, I was probably, well, I owned a big international wine company at the time, and you would think I would have known that, right? But that clicked to me in 2000. And I remember going back to South Africa, giving out Freedom from Fear, giving it to the employees and saying, when you reach this goal, I want to know what your next goal is. And it was only because while I'm flying down there, I'm thinking about, holy cow, I never thought about that. When you reach a goal, set a new one. That just
Right.
didn't work for me. And I'd probably been pretty good right at that point. But so that those were things from Freedom from Fear. What on the speaking world would you say would be some of your favorite clients, those organizations that just really, really gave you in return some satisfaction, some fun, and you could tell you made a difference?
Well, three come to mind. One, an association in Chicago that's been hiring me for almost 20 years now. At least once or twice a year, they bring me out. Chicago MCA, it's a group of commercial contractors. It's been lovely. And I grew up in the contracting business, so I keep trying to leave contracting, and I thought I was out. They pulled me back in. They just keep calling. Uh, Charlie had coordinated me speaking to 2,500 people in Pennsylvania. Uh, and I did one keynote in Baltimore, and it was one of those things where I was driving like crazy to get to the Pennsylvania gig, and I literally got there half an hour before I was supposed to go on. They said, "Oh, you're here, come in," and they kind of whisked me to the stage, and I did a Charlie Jones imitation because they all knew who he was, and I got a standing ovation, and I sold like $8,000 worth of books, and it was one of those. It was so heady, right? It was so kind of overwhelming. Standing ovation lasted for like a minute. It was like I'd never had that happen before. I'd had standing ovations, but not like the intensity of that one.
Right.
And that night I called my father and I said, "You're not going to believe what just happened. I just talked to 1,500 people." And I said, "It takes a while for 1,500 people to stop laughing." I had to slow way down and like pause, right? Because I use a lot of humor. And,
Right.
and I said, "Dad, I sold $8,000 worth of books. Isn't that nuts?" There's this long pause, and he said, "I knew you had it in you. I'm proud of you." And it's now he's gone. I remember after my dad passed away, I thought, who do I call now?
Right.
To talk, and the answer is my youngest son. I
Hmm.
call him now and say, because he played basketball in college and then overseas. And I said, "Evan, I just had a triple double tonight, man. I just." And he's like, "That's great, Dad. I'm super proud of you." And now he's having kids of his own. He has two beautiful boys. But I think the one that was the most kind of mystical,
Mhm.
I had done a keynote for a group called Coverings, which is basically contractors who do flooring and tile.
Hmm.
And there was, I don't know, a couple thousand people there. And about 3 weeks later, I was working with a client of mine, a contractor in New Jersey, and I got a request to speak in Istanbul. And it had like Turkish writing in the email signature. And I thought it was one of those Nigerian prince lost all my money emails. And I almost deleted it, Bill. It was like, but then I happened to be literally in a conference room, and the head of controls for this company was from Turkey.
Okay.
So I said, can you verify that this is a real person, not some scam? He goes, "She's a big deal. You should absolutely call her like right now." And so he agreed to get on the conference call with us, and he spoke to her in Turkish, and and then he's handed it off to me, and I ended up doing a keynote to 1,500 people in Istanbul,
Excellent.
which was amazing. Now, here's the rest of that story. So half the audience had translation earbuds on.
Okay.
I had 1 hour. I had 5 guaranteed funny bits that works every single time in America.
Mhm.
No one laughed. Crickets. It didn't land. And I'm thinking, I am just falling on my face here. This is terrible. Well, lost in translation, right? So afterwards, I asked the woman who hired me, I said, "Banu, how did my talk go?" She goes, "Oh, wonderful, Mr. Mark. Everybody loved your talk." I said, "No one laughed." She goes, "Oh, Turkish men don't laugh in public, sign of weakness." I said, "Do they ever laugh?" She said, "Oh, yes, with best friend in bar, 3 drinks."
Best friend in bar, 3 drinks.
So when I told my webmaster that story, his name's Kevin, he changed my ringtone to crickets.
Well done.
Those stand out, Bill, just off the top of my head.
Yeah. Um, so how did you feel when you felt like you were making an impact? How did you want to scale that, or how do you get to more audiences with your message? How do you see that happening for you?
Well, I have an electronic newsletter that goes out to like 8,000 people.
Okay.
And almost every month somebody calls as a result, a direct result of that.
Yeah.
I also started doing a podcast about, because I don't know if it was Charlie or somebody else has said, the quality of my life is proportionate to the quality of my service to other people. How do I expand? I think it was Earl Nightingale. How do I expand my service to other people? That's the big question, right? So I kind of systematically, I thought about that over and over again. And then a group I was working with, a contractor group, asked me to do some podcasts. And they were really popular, and the membership loved them. And then inexplicably, they decided to, after 35 of them, to go a different direction. And I felt bad for about 14 minutes. And then I thought, wait a minute, it's not a snub. It's a business decision. So what? Who cares? And a lot of people complained, but I just moved on, and I made a list of 10 manufacturers that I'd done work with, and big corporations. And the first one I called, Fujitsu, I said, hey, I'm thinking about doing a podcast. Would you guys sponsor it? He said, absolutely. This is a guy that hired me multiple times to speak. So now I had a sponsor. And so somebody was paying me still, again, to do the podcast. But I got to choose kind of the format, and I decided to quote Charlie Jones, books and people, people and books, right? You'd be the same person in 5 years, except for two things. So it's Mark Matteson on books and people. And I started this podcast, mine, and I think I have 95 now interviews.
Okay.
And I'm always looking for authors, and I'm always looking for fascinating people like you, Bill, who I absolutely want on my podcast. And it's not unlike what we're doing right now. It's just a series of easy questions to answer, and it's all audio. So now I've got the e-zine, which is kind of
Because I have a face for radio, so that's good. It's all audio.
you and I both. I mean, I go to the barber, I say, how about those Seahawks? And 30 seconds later, he says, next. I go to give him a tip. He said, no, I couldn't. That be stealing. Trim the ears. He means inside. So there's that. This woman said at my 40-year high school reunion, she goes, you've lost some hair since high school. I said, that's a bald-faced lie. The same amount I had in high school. It's just moved around a little. It's my ears and my nose and on my back. So she left me alone. She walked away. So I had the e-zine covered. I had the podcast covered. I just recorded a video, a sales training video with modules.
Okay.
So I'm constantly looking for ways to expand my reach and service to other people.
Would the video be B2B or B2C? What kind of sales training is
Yeah,
it?
so I developed the curriculum primarily for residential contractors, but the principles, honestly, I shouldn't say this, but I plagiarized Frank Bettcher's book, How I Raised Myself from a Failure to Success in Selling, right?
Okay.
And which, you probably read. It's arguably one of the greatest sales books, and there are 31 principles in that book. Well, what I did, it wasn't plagiarism per se. I took the concept like referrals or qualification, qualifying a prospect, and I modernized it and I made it specific to contractors. Now, you don't have to be a contractor to get a lot of value out of it, right? What questions do you ask? How do you actively listen? How do you disqualify a prospect? Putting a proposal together, a choice of yeses, overcoming objections, closing the sale, service after the sale, those kinds of things. And so it's $495, which is ridiculously low, but not everybody can afford to bring me out for a day to do sales training. So I found a way to do that, for a modest price. And honestly, Bill, it came from reading Steve Martin's book, Born Standing Up. The decision he made at the height of his career as a comedian, 40,000 people were coming to his concerts.
Right.
And then in 1980, he just walked away. But what he wanted, he said, it all gotten out of hand and it just became bigger than I could handle. But he said, I decided to try a first movie because that way I could work on this project, do it, and then go home, and then people would come to the theater and not to me.
Right.
And so, I mean, the rest is history, obviously. The guy's a genius.
Right.
But that was kind of the motivation, was I can reach more people if they just go there. Now I don't have to fly out. But during COVID, I started coaching as well. That was another people ask me, well, I actually started before that. One gentleman said to me, how many books have you written? At the time, I think it was 5 or 6. And he said, how did you do that? And I said, I carved out the same time every day, and I wrote for an hour or 3 pages, whichever came first. And I did that until it was done. And I spent like an hour on the phone with this guy, and he said, this was really valuable. Can we do it again? I said, absolutely. He said, I'd pay you, of course. I don't expect you to, And I was like, what? You would pay me for this? So I became an accidental coach, right? And so I still have coaching clients in, different categories, but it's, I didn't, I didn't take some class and get certified. I
Right.
just did something that people were interested in and wanted to know more about.
Yeah, but you didn't take the class. But knowing what I know about you, you've read it, you've heard it, you've tried it, you've exampled it.
Well,
You've
like
got to
you,
get
Bill, when you read 2 books a week for 30 years, good things happen.
good things happen. That's
I
right.
mean, come on, you can't. I had a mentor of mine, a guy named Bill Cole. He said, Mark, become an object of interest to your clients. He said, people buy you. He said, go to work on your own. Jim Rohn said the same thing. Go to work
Right.
on your own personal development. Work harder on yourself than you do on your job. If you work hard on your job, you make a living. You work hard on yourself, you make a fortune. And that became true. So I was like, I just, and you and I listened to a lot of the same voices. We dipped our bucket in a lot of the same wells,
Right.
right?
That's right. Yeah. And a lot of them were through that mentor of Charlie Jones for me, because I
Hey,
had a job one time as being president of the largest family-owned printing company, and we printed all the 6x9 books, which is also the true business reason why I wanted you to be at 100 pages or less, because 6x9 books are 64 pages, 32 signatures, as they would call them. And
right.
lo and behold, 64 plus 32, that's your book. And that's counting blank pages,
Yeah,
forward, etc. So it wasn't just that it was too long a story, it was that'll cost me an extra dollar a book or a buck and a quarter a book back in
right.
the per
Yeah, I
page.
found that out with this one. It's like
Yep.
300 pages. Okay. And I don't talk about it much because I basically wrote it for my grandkids.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was very autobiographical. And it's like old light through new windows. I'm the old light, and my grandkids were the new windows. So it was really this is what I hope, this is what I learned. And I hope after I'm gone, you'll read it and Bappa will still be making a difference in your life.
Right. So our series is called Meet the Speaker. What's your goal for speaking? Is it uh, to help people? Because our format is the audience should be CEOs and owners. So if you're a CEO or owner, what do they need to know to be able to have you come speak, or what topics might be of relevance to their organization that you're one of the best at? How do they fit themselves into your puzzle?
Well, I have to go back to, gosh, I want to say 10 years ago. And at that point, I think I had 5 or 6 books, but I'd written a bunch of ebooks as well on customer service, on sales. So she said to me, "What's your speech about?" I said, with my tongue in cheek, I said about 90 minutes. And she goes, "No, no, no, the topic." Right. And I could tell she was like super serious. And I said, well, I said, I have a variety of talks. I have like 5 or 6 different talks on different subjects. Presenting like a pro came as a direct result of the number 2 guy at York saying to me, can you teach our regional sales managers how to present like you do? And I said, oh, uh, give me a couple of weeks, Matt, and I'll let me think about it. So I mind mapped the whole thing. I came up with 10 modules. I started typing, and 78 pages later, I had presenting like a pro. And I sent him the rough draft. And I said, if I were to give that presentation, it would be all day, and this is what I would talk about: how to use a flip chart, how to use humor, and all those things. He goes, great. When can you do it? And that's literally how I started developing curriculum. So when I told this woman 5 or 6 topics, she goes, nobody can be an expert on 5 or 6 things. I said, I didn't say I was an expert. But I understand platform skills, and I understand content, and I understand process. And brainstorming and role playing and all those things come into play when I do a keynote or a seminar. And it just wasn't a good fit. And I said, I don't think I'm what you're looking for. and we parted ways. But I didn't stop writing and I didn't stop developing curriculum because I did the customer service excellence ebook and seminar because a group of CEOs of large commercial contractors in Chicago said, our guys need charm school. That's literally what they said. And I said, what you're talking about are soft skills like empathy, active listening, dealing with an angry customer, under promise, over deliver, those kinds of things. And they said, yeah, that's exactly what we're looking for. So I put that curriculum together. And I found, Bill, that it was easier for me to create new curriculum than it was to find new clients. Right.
Okay.
So I started expanding my offerings and I stayed super busy for a long time. But every time somebody contacts me, I take them through 8 to 10 questions about what they want to accomplish. Right. What are their objectives? Now, whether that's a 90-minute keynote or an all-day seminar, it doesn't matter. The questions are the same. What's your number one objective? What would that mean to you to achieve it? What would it mean to the audience to achieve it? What knowledge, attitude, skills, and habits and behaviors would you like to see changed? How would we know when we get there? Who's going to be in the audience? What's the demographic? What are their responsibilities? Why did you call me? Why now? Why in this manner? Right. And so by the time we get done with the questions, I've tailored either the keynote or the seminar to, and then I say, would you like to sustain the momentum by offering, I'll turn to you and say, if we were to give everybody a copy of the book, do you think they'd read it? And he said, that'd be great. Put that as an option. But lately, Bill, and this is what's fascinating, I'm constantly amazed at how stupid I was 2 years ago, and the cycle keeps repeating.
Oops.
2 years ago, I started asking a really simple question. How many of you, by a show of hands, would rather listen to a book than read it? And 60% of the audience every single time raises their hand for listening. So I put a PDF together that had the ebook for Freedom from Fear and the Audible in a link so they could click on either one and listen to it while they drive. So now, instead of lugging 200 books with me to the next speaking engagements, I only lug 40%.
Right.
Right. And then I make sure that whoever hires me gets the PDF to forward and he or she gets the credit.
Right.
And that's accomplished a couple of things. Number one, it expands the reach that I can make a bigger difference in the audience after the keynote, after the seminar. See, I want to sustain the momentum. Yes, I hope they set goals. Yes, I hope they keep a journal. Yes, I hope they have a great attitude, stretch comfort zones, all those things. But mostly what I want them to do is continue that journey on their own. Right.
Yeah.
And create a kind of critical mass, because it's really about the culture. And the CEO almost always leads the charge. What was it? I think it was Dr. Deming that told the story about Peterson, the CEO of Ford at the time. And Deming was in his 90s. He taught the Japanese about quality, and then they used it against us, and Toyota was born. So here he thought, I'm going to bring in 1986, Ford was taking a beating from, Toyota and Honda. And so he brings Deming in and introduces the famous Dr. Deming, who was like 93 years old. And then Peterson walks out of the room and goes in his office and makes some phone calls. And Deming literally walked off the stage, walked into his office and said, "You're not ready." And he left. And 500 people were sitting there waiting to hear from Dr. Deming, and he left. Well, then they end up firing Peterson, right? Like a year later. And then the next guy, I forget his name, he took over, and they changed the motto to Ford, our job is quality one, or quality is job one. That was their new, well, that was after they brought Dr. Deming back and they went through the 4-day seminar, right? But I love that story because it's like, okay, Alexander the Great conquered most of the known world and out in front on his white horse. And his generals was saying, Al, I'm paraphrasing here, Al, yo, buddy, you can't do that, man. You're going to get killed. We need you in the back. And he said, I can't lead from behind. I got to lead in front.
Exactly.
And so I have a pretty clear idea what my clients want to accomplish before I ever fly out and step on a stage.
Okay.
I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Well, I'm trying to help the audience put, because we have 30 speakers at CEO Zones, and I was trying to make sure that I would say, and I'll probably get in trouble from 29 others, that you're probably the most educational, fun presenter, which to me, on my learning style, when we talked 3, 4 weeks ago, I was laughing 15 minutes after we hung up, and my wife was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I was just thinking about Mark and what he said, you know," and I was replaying in my mind some of the things we talked about. And that's something that sets you apart in my mind, is the way you use humor and the way you educate. It makes me need to replay the tape in my own little head. And not every speaker either has a topic or a style that does that. So that's one thing that kind of sets you apart differently in my mind. Nothing against our other speakers, but that I congratulate you for. And I know you keep honing the skills, but
Well, to Charlie's point, he said, "I'll give you 10 years to stop saying that."
well,
That's
and in your book, I think you say you try to be humble, but the minute you think you're not, you aren't, or you are, you aren't. So
yeah.
there
The
you
minute you think you're humble, it's gone. Yeah,
go. Yeah.
yeah. Don't be so humble. You're not that great. I had somebody say to me one time.
Okay. Uh, I'm going to check my notes just 1 second, because anybody that knows me knows I'm a tad analytical. So let's just make sure that I'm going to go through. We didn't hit all my questions, but I think you covered the ground better than I would have. So I appreciate that. What would be success for you in the next 5 years? That was something I did want to learn from.
Hmm. Well, in 2 weeks, I'm going out to Raleigh to do my first TED Talk.
Hmm.
And there won't be a dry eye in the house because I've already given this talk about 50 or 60 times, and I don't have it memorized, but I don't need notes. I won't need notes. Um, I want I'd love to have 5 million people hear that message because it's an idea we're spreading, and I think that's, again, it goes back to how do I expand my reach and make a difference in more people's lives. That's what it comes down to. Is, books are a way to do that by all means. Podcasts are great, e-zines are lovely, but the medium that I was least committed to was the video, and so now TED kind of fills that. So that's number one. Number
Wow.
two, I want to live long enough to be really annoying to my grandkids.
Amen. Me too.
So I can say, I remember there was nothing from here all the way over to here. Why, in my day, you know, and say things like, I'm sold, I don't even buy green bananas anymore. I want to make people laugh and live and leave a legacy. And to do that, I need to continue to do what I'm doing. I do between 50 and 75 talks a year. Some of those are on Zoom, but during COVID, there was like almost all of them were that way. But somebody asked me, they said, you travel all the time. You're like on the road almost every week. And I said, yeah, you have to understand, I love it. When I was a kid, we went to England every other summer. My mother was a travel agent and she was British. So the travel is hardwired in, and I love what I do and I have a passion for making a difference in people's lives. So, I want to continue doing this. Both Charlie and Zig Ziglar were doing this into their 80s. And
Right.
so, not just 5 years, I fully intend to be alive at 95 and be delivering keynotes and making a difference. And so, yeah, I want to keep honing my craft. I feel like I feel like I'm at a point right now where, without any prep, I could step on a stage and say,
Right.
what 2 or 3 things you guys want to talk about, and I could do that, and I have done that. But I still, and this is back to Steve Martin, I still make a set list for every single talk I do. I have a big set list journal that I use, and I mind map the whole thing, and then I lay it all out, and I have those notes. And again, the answers to the questions I ask are integrated into the set list. So hopefully I'm delivering, what matters to the client.
Right.
So to stay healthy and keep doing what I do. And I have at least 5 more books in me,
Oh, excellent.
at least 5 more. And God willing, this creek don't rise, I might have 10 more, but I can't stop writing. And I love, and you know what it is, Bill? It's the complete opposite of my public life. It's very public what I do. But when I get on that airplane and I head back,
Mhm.
The headphones are on and the book's open, and I'm back to solitude. And
So,
that's the duality of Mark Matteson. I'm a situational extrovert, or what's called an ambivert. When it's time for me to get on the stage, I'm this guy. I'm Charlie Jones. I'm Bob Moat. I'm Lou Tice. Uh, when it's time for me to not be on the road, uh, I'm George Bernard Shaw riding in a hut. He had a separate hut that he rode in.
yeah. Kind
And
of
the
like
sign on the
Hemingway.
door said, "Unless the house is on fire, do not disturb." And he'd go there every day for 4 hours.
Wow. That's dedication to the craft. That's good. I'm surprised that you have not done a TED Talk before. My impression would have been that, and you're not our only content partner who is doing that now. They've been speakers for decades and just now getting into the TED Talk.
Right.
What might be behind that, or what's causing uh, newer speakers to get a TED Talk and somebody that's been out there doing it just now? Because I can think of two, maybe three of our content partners that are either just finished their first TED Talk or about to do their first TED Talk. What's that about? Or is there an answer to that? Or maybe there's no answer to that.
Well, so when I was at Edge Learning Institute, I was there for almost 4 years, and I worked with a gentleman named Andrew Bennett, who is he's one of my oldest and closest friends, and he's a professional magician. He's a world-class speaker, a consultant, one of the smartest people I know. And like me, every time I saw him, he had a different book, so we just really made a connection 30 some years ago. But we talk all the time. And about 6 years ago, he did his first TED Talk, and okay, so he's a magician, right? So
Mhm.
that's one of the things he does. He's done some acting, and anyway, so he comes out on the stage with a flip chart on an easel and sets it down, and then begins his talk. And then halfway through his talk, he makes a bowling ball come out of the flip chart. Now, how he does that, I have no idea. He wouldn't tell me. Those magicians are so secretive. And but and the quality of the TED Talk was awful. The video guy was terrible, and it was moving around,
Oh,
and it was awful, but it still had like 300,000 views. Well, then fast forward 5 years or so, he's getting ready to do another TED Talk, and he was doing it, significantly north of where I am, up in the San Juans. But I said, "Can I come?" And he said, "Mark, I love you like a brother, but you'd be a distraction. It just needs to be all business." And the next one he did was phenomenal, and using magic as the metaphor. So it was more kind of in line with it. And I thought, I need to do that. I need to do one of those TED Talks. But then all that was, Bill, was the seed that was planted. You have to have an idea worth spreading.
okay.
And I wanted to test my idea. I call it the letter, right? 10 great things about someone that made a difference in your life while they're still alive, not after they're gone, right? Because a lot of people had asked me to speak at different friends' funerals, and I would write the 10 things about them I admired.
Mhm.
And first one what I did was my German teacher in high school, and then my father-in-law. And I realized I was ending my talks with this 15, 20-minute vignette of the letter.
Right.
And every single time, Bill, somebody came up to me and said, "Your story about your father-in-law made me cry. And I'm going to
Mhm.
write a letter to my mom today." And that happened every single time I told that story. And depending on how large the audience was, it was a dozen or 20 people that said that to me. So I realized I had field tested the story, so I knew it was good, and I knew
Right.
it was an idea worth spreading, and that I could sell that to the people who put these things together. So that's why. That's the whole backstory.
Okay.
Then I'll be in Raleigh, North Carolina on the 18th to deliver. I'm one of 10 speakers.
Okay. August 18th. Or
Yes,
okay.
yes, in 11 days or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I hope that answered your question.
It did, because I have zero desire to be a speaker. As you said in one of your books or one of your audibles, the number one fear in the world is being a public speaker. That's me. I'm not, I know how to hire them. I know how to guide them. I don't want to be them.
Right. And
So
yet you're eloquent and you have a great vocabulary and you're easy to talk to. So
um, I went to sixth grade and figured out that's what I needed to know. So thank
and I
you.
flunked high school English, but I'm
I
still a writer. Who knew? I got an F sophomore English. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I've given enough money to colleges that they say good things about me, but I never stayed longer than a week at any college.
Oh my
Um,
God.
yeah, so
Oh,
I
Bill,
think we've
talking
got
to
a
you is a joy.
thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to remember some things with you,
Mm.
and just an honor to have you as a content partner here at CEO Zones. And I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Well, Bill, you know I'm going to end with a story because I have to.
That's you.
Okay. So this contractor was wiring a warehouse in Kentucky. It was a Jack Daniels distillery. And he'd been up on the catwalk for like a week, putting in all new controls. And one fateful day, he slipped and fell and landed into a vat of bourbon that was aging 30 feet by 60 feet, and he drowned. The next day in the shop, they said, "Did you hear about old Joe? It sounded like he never had a chance." And the foreman on the job said, "Excuse me?" "Well, it sounded like he never had a chance." And the foreman said, "No, I wouldn't say that. He got out twice to go to the bathroom." And I tell my audiences, don't let it be said you didn't have a chance to apply at least one of these ideas. Make it a great day unless you have other plans.
Exactly. Which is something I meant to mention earlier. Your book, you get to the end of the chapter and you make sure that the listener or the reader picked up on what your objective was for them to learn. That is a lost art. I think people started to do it, and then they thought, oh, people are smart enough, they'll journal, they'll go along. But I can tell you that that is a skill that all of us need to use. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.